is it's kind of a misnomer. You guys know misnomer, misnomer. Misnomer means badly named. Because when you look at it, misnamed, when you look at it, it sounds like it was maybe the French fighting the Indians, okay? Or maybe someone fought French and Indian people. And so what it really is the French and their Indian allies fighting the English colonies and their Indian allies. Well, that's a mouthful, all right? But nonetheless, it is part of a series of wars in Europe that continuously spilled over into the Americas. And this really transformed society in our country. Now, keep in mind that the Great Awakening events were about 20 years prior to this. We were talking about the Great Awakening yesterday, the religious revival. And this is in the midst of the late period of colonial settlement. So by this point, slavery is full in effect. The colonies are pretty well divided in terms of society and structure. But we want to get started with the French itself, the French themselves. So during the beginning, during the lead up to colonization, the French had a different issue than the English. The French were an absolute monarchy, and I mean absolute. They were under the rule of the most noted absolutist in history, Louis XIV, Louis XIV, the Sun King. And so they hadn't done a whole lot of settlement. Initially, the French, if you remember a guy named Jacques Cartier, had done some exploration, and one colonial settler named Samuel de Champlain had actually set up a colony. So the colony of Quebec was established during the reign of Louis XIII. But it had not been very, very settled. But Samuel de Champlain was here. He was the sort of governor of Quebec. But pretty much all this outpost was doing was trapping for fur, like the Dutch, and sending French Jesuit missionaries, Catholic missionaries. So that was pretty much the two groups that were here. Now, during the reign of the Sun King, some of these missionaries became explorers. These French Catholic missionaries would explore the interior of North America. One, Ferdinand Lassalle, sailed down the Mississippi River and claimed all of the region from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, Louisiana. So named after his monarch, King Louis. So pretty much from this moment, 1682, until 1807, the vast interior of North America will be called Louisiana. So for the better part of 120 years. So I'm not just talking about that southern state down that just got hit by a hurricane, but I'm talking about, Iowa and Western Kentucky and Illinois were all part of this thing called Louisiana. Okay. Another explorer was Antoine Cadillac, and he founded the Straits, Detroit. So if you're familiar with where Michigan is, this is about the extent of French exploration. So it wasn't very much. Now, one of the reasons why it was slow, several reasons, was first of all, the French actually owned land more. And I know that seems hard to imagine, but the peasants in France had quite a bit of land, even though the Catholic Church had most of the land. There was no enclosure movement in France. There was no homeless people roaming about on a vast level as there had been in England. Secondly, the people who might have migrated for religious motives, the Huguenots, who under Louis XIII were no longer allowed freedom of religion. You may remember Cardinal Richelieu and the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. So the Huguenots, these French Protestants, were not allowed to leave. So the French Calvinists weren't like the Puritans. They didn't get to come here for religious freedom. Instead, they got persecuted. And then where the French most settled and most set up colonies was in the Caribbean, the French West Indies, they were called. So if you think about Haiti, Haiti became a major French sugar colony. And the Caribbean was where the French kind of promoted over Canada. And can you blame them? I would take the Caribbean over Canada most any given day. All right. So the French didn't come over here like the Spanish or the English. If you want to compare them to any other European power at the time, they're kind of like the Dutch. They kind of came over here like the Netherlands. Okay. Now, what the French exploration did consist of primarily was groups like fur trappers, who I mentioned, and the fur trappers got a neat name. In fact, it's one of the coolest nicknames I think I've ever seen in terms of like people, and they were called coureurs de bois. So the coureurs de bois were the runners of the woods. These were the the guys who dressed in skins, you know, and leather skins, and ran around and really had a great old time living like Indians. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a moment because I don't think y'all have the sheet.